Good evening. This is Glenn here, and this evening I'd like to talk to you all about a system or an operating system that a lot of you use out there. Some of you use it on your home computer, some of you use it in your office, using your business and so on, and that is the operating system called Windows Vista. Now, a lot of you are probably still using XP out there. Some of you are using Vista, some of you are using the successor to Windows Vista, and that's Windows 7. We'll talk about Windows 7 at another time, but I like to focus on Windows Vista only because a lot of people asking me questions about it as an IT professional. They've said, Glenn, how come it's so slow? How come Windows Vista takes a while for it to boot up? How come it takes a long time for it to shut down? I'm really frustrated with Windows Vista. It seems like a memory hog. I'm going to kind of give you the background information why all that's so. And then after I explain to you, you may have an understanding of why it does what it does. And it's there for a reason. First of all, let's talk about the process of logging on to Windows Vista, because assuming that you have it all installed in your system, you find that it runs a little bit slower than XP. And that's okay, because that's what it's supposed to do. Because it's going through more processes to help make sure that you have the most secure system out there. But one of the processes that makes your system a little bit slower, but will save your grace, is a process called authentication. And all authentication really means is a process of verifying the credentials, who you are. If you're logged on your computer onto your network, whether it's at work or at home or whether it's any environment, you would obviously like to know as a user that you're accessing your information, not somebody else's. It's important to understand that. So authentication in Windows Vista is really what it does is, like in any computing environment, is a process of verifying the user and username and what your password is. And once you successfully authenticate into that system to gain access to a local computer, enables you to gather resources, it helps you to log on to the network, helps you gather stuff that you need so you can have a productive day. One thing I want to say is that unlike XP, user credentials in Windows Vista are encrypted and sent via authentication protocols. I'm not going to get into the process on how we do the protocols, because that's another sub-course that I'll put together. But the important thing to remember as a user and as a system administrator is that you have to have an understanding that the system is there to protect you. This is what Microsoft did. They did a very good job at it. It's to make sure that you're essentially protected and your system is well secure from intruders from outside. Now, Windows Vista uses a single sign-on method, which requires a user to provide a name and a password to gain access to the local network and its resources. So, when you gather those resources, you can get them once, get them twice, get them 3 times. But one thing you need to remember, unlike Windows XP, is the single sign-on method reduces the risk of malicious attacks, because the credentials that you have are not being exposed across the entire local area network. And I got to tell you that with XP, every time you requested for an action to take place on your computer, it was being sent across the LAN the whole time. And your stuff was getting exposed everywhere, whether it was your credit card number, whether it was, you were in your office at work and you were buying something from a vendor, and your credit card number from the company was being constantly exposed, which somebody can go in and attack it, steal that credit card number, and cost you possibly your job, or can cause your business a substantial financial loss. So this is why Microsoft developed this operating system, because they want to help counteract that. They wanted to say, you know what, we don't want to have people sending their stuff across the network continually. We want to have a one-stop shop. We want them to send it across, get to the authentication server, and that's it. We don't want to be having to authenticate continually and sending our stuff across the network. So that was a really good selling point for Windows Vista. And so to expand on that statement, Windows Vista prevents older, less secure protocols from being used. When you talk about the domains with servers running the Windows 2003, okay, and when I'm talking about 2003, I'm talking about the corresponding server platform to Windows XP. Windows Vista clients or computers use the version 5 authentication protocol. And that was something that was unique about the Windows Vista operating system, and that's what's unique about it to this day. Windows Vista clients use the NT, remember the old NT operating system? That was the predecessor to Windows 2000, Windows NT. But it uses the NT LAN manager, or they call it the NTLM version 2 protocol in Windows NT domains when they are not joined to a network. An interesting fact there, because we need to understand that authentication protocols, and don't get authentication protocols confused, and I apologize if I'm using those big terms, but just understand that Windows Vista provides stronger security because they use the challenge and response method. The client sends a logon request, which includes information such as your name, your host name or your computer name, that is, your work group name, and domain name. When I talk about work group, I'm talking about a group of computers on a LAN working with one another. You know, you may have a work group, you may have a computer in an office, and the person that works in his office may be your accounts receivables. The user in the other office may be accounts payable, and the other one in office may be the credit department, and maybe the sales department. But you're all one work group, and that's how it's configured in a given LAN environment. So just kind of understand that. When you talk about host name, you're really talking about client host. Host is actually a computer. It's your system. You're the host. All right, and then of course you got a server. Server serves you, so you can go to that server and you can use all those shared folders and all those shared drives and all the things that you need to use. That's why they call it a server, because it's there to serve you as a host. Your computer's the host. Hopefully that makes things a little bit easier for you to understand. Now, the authentication service generates a series of hexadecimal characters. Now, I'm not going to get into the math part because that's not the purpose of what I'm trying to, the message I'm trying to send tonight. But understand, again, as I said before, that the hexadecimal character is called a challenge and sends it to the client, your computer, and they perform a mathematical algorithm on the challenge to generate a response. The client then sends the response to the authentication service, which essentially gets you on the network. So, very interesting process. And so the whole idea behind this, and let me kind of emphasize this a little bit, that's the reason why Windows Vista is slow. Bottom line, that's why it's slow. So if somebody asks you, as a network administrator, if a user comes up to you and says, why is my system running so slow? You can explain to them after you watch this video. Explain it very clearly to you. One thing we need to understand, though, is that Windows Vista supports a few, well, I won't say a few, a handful of authentication methods using specific hardware to provide higher level security. And some of you may be familiar with a smart card authentication. Some of you have that at work. Some of you use it in your office. I know we use it in the Department of the Army. We have a logon process by utilizing our common access cards, which are assigned PIN numbers. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But just understand that smart card authentication is one way to provide a higher level of security in the Windows Vista platform. We also have biometric authentication, and that's a little more complex. That's a step higher than the smart card process. Essentially what you're doing with biometrics is you're taking your thumb, it's registering into an authentication server, telling you, yep, that's really you, really without a doubt. Now let me talk about smart card usage, and this is something that you shouldn't do. One of the best practices that you should always sustain in any given environment is make sure that you don't share your PIN number or your CAT card with anybody else but you. Again, never share your passwords with anybody else but you. It's just the best business practice. So, but my biometric authentication, there is no point of return. Someone can't log on for you because your thumbprint is already registered in the authentication database, and there's no way that somebody else will be able to say that's you by using your thumbprint. Now, one thing we need to understand also is that the smart card authentication process really is the gold standard as we live today to provide authentication into a given network and provide that one extra level of security. Biometric technology, unlike CAD card technology, is more expensive and it's very much in its infancy right now. I don't have the statistics in front of me, but I can tell you the percentages are very small for those corporations, for those enterprises that are essentially using biometric technology to authenticate on a given network. But really how this smart card technology works here, I'm going to focus on that right now because that is really the gold standard, is the smart card authentication uses an integral circuit on a card and a reader. It contains a computer chip on which the administrator will go in and install the user's credentials and public key, as well as a digital certificate and certification authority signature at a time in which it's valid. So basically what we're saying here is that that smart card corresponds to a specific public key. It corresponds to a certification of authority that will allow you to access the network with your PIN number and the actual chip that's installed in that card. So anytime you get on the system, it'll be able to recognize who you are by using that process. Now, smart card authentication provides a high level of security because smart cards are self-contained and you can't gain access without one. And the one thing you need to understand is that although smart cards are out there, okay, they're out there and people are using them, nothing would prohibit you from sharing your smart card with somebody else if you give them your PIN number. But again, that is one thing you absolutely don't want to do. In fact, in some corporations and some companies, you sign a user agreement that you will never share your password or CAD card again. If you do, it'd be subject to a termination. So, bottom line is, don't share your passwords, don't share your PIN numbers. One other thing we kind of need to talk about tonight that I think is important is the fact that biometric authentication uses your thumbprint. It takes that thumbprint, but like the CAD card authentication process, it takes your thumb and register it into a database so you can also authenticate via using your thumb. We kind of talked about that a little bit earlier. One of the drawbacks with biometric authentication, and although it's the highest level of security, it's very costly. And as I said, it's very much in its infancy right now, and I don't have the statistics or the numbers of how many enterprises out there that actually use biometrics exclusively within their given network. But I can rest assure you that it's very small right now because it is costly. And how it works basically is, and I've seen it demonstrated before, is there's a USB adapter in back of a given CPU, central processing unit. You plug it in, it's plug and play, and you just put your thumb on and it automatically logs you into the system by using your thumb. One thing about the Windows Vista logon architecture, it's been redesigned to make it more secure. Microsoft was very serious about the vulnerabilities that existed in XP, so they decided to go ahead and produce this type of OS. Now, Windows 7 obviously is what's being sold right now in the market, but I can tell you right now a lot of government agencies are still using Vista. Vista is slow, as I said, and I talked about some of the reasons why it's slow, simply because there's a lot of processes taking place in the background to make your system more secure. Alright, that's about it for tonight. If you have any questions, email me, and I'll be more than happy to answer you. You can email me on Facebook, just send me a message, and I'll be more than happy to help you there as well. Anyway, good talking to you, happy computing, and I look forward to talking to you again. Thank you. Bye-bye.